Today, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about tool chains and commands and things that you're going to need to know to do this job in networking. And I was trying to think of a networking position that did not require understanding of operating systems or just, pure networking. That's it, just pure networking. That's the only thing you did was working with switches and routers. And the jobs around here, I can say that that's not going to be the case. You would have to be a tier 3 or 4, well, tier 3 engineer for AT&T or Sprint to where the operating systems are actually running the switch. So you would actually have to use very specific hardware description type languages, but you still have to have the understanding of an operating system and how it gets input and output. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you some fun stuff on commands that will be helpful to your future in the world of networking. And even if you're a server admin. Now, in the world of test out, you should see my screen now, and let me move a few windows around. What I'll be doing is I'll be demoing a little bit from VMware, okay? And I'm also going to demo a little bit from VirtualBox. Now, on Linux, I can run both at the same time. I don't know how Microsoft will behave, but my assumption is it should behave, but we'll see. So we'll have some fun. But what I'd like to start with is some suite of tools that, shall we say, are wrappers to other tools, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is bring over my DOS prompt into the share screen here, and I'm going to type in exit, and let's see, ls. I don't know if the test out will show you this. It's on the configuration. It's part of what you need to know. netsh. If you have not played with this and you're trying to get a job in networking, it's going to be a major hindrance to your interview process. It's that important. netsh is a wrapper to the networking stack to Microsoft Windows TCP/IP. So if you don't know this command, write it down, go learn how to use it, okay? It's that important because it makes things faster and easier, okay? You don't have to bounce, you don't have to go through 800 mouse clicks to find what you need to find. And then Microsoft is pretty good about their help. So you just type in netsh and hit help, and it gives you all this wonderful stuff to learn about, okay? So what am I doing? Oh my gosh, look at this stuff. You can actually do everything through your networking stack using the netsh command, okay? Now I'm running this as a standard user. You will probably need to run this as a administrator to be able to do everything you need to do, okay? But netsh is one of those things that you just put a bookmark in your brain that says, I need to learn 3 commands out of netsh today. Okay, I need to learn 2 commands out of netsh today. I need to learn 1 more today. So what you do is you make you learn these things. Now, here's another reason I'm going to tell you why this is so interesting. See this version of commit. This is where you make changes in RAM and you test it. And then when you want to make it permanent, you type in the word commit. And this concept of configuring, testing, and then putting it into an XML file or a JSON file or writing it to disk is across platforms. It's on your Cisco switches, it's on your Ubiquiti switches, it's on your Fortinet switches, it's everywhere. And one way that you can approach some of this stuff is play with Alpine or pfSense or some of these other network-based distributions of Linux that are free. You don't have to spend a lot of money on it, like VYOS, and there's other ones out there, where you go through this menu structure and you configure things, and then you commit your changes, bounce the box, and now you have everything in firmware ready to rock and roll. Now, you may have heard that when Amazon lost their West Coast DNS, it's because somebody hit the wrong button at the wrong time. In these commands where you get this netsh, I'll just type in LAN. Notice how the prompt changes. And type in show devices. Look, there's nothing not found. So if I just type in show, it says, okay, what do I want to see? Let's do show interfaces. Show interfaces. And let's see if it does it right. Show inter. Yeah, not running. Dot service not running. Okay. It's because I'm also running it as a standard use. Show mode. Where am I? I'm online. I can go offline, disconnect the stack. There's entire tutorials. There's pages and pages and pages of tutorials on the netsh command. You can also script it, which is why Microsoft created this thing, so you can script things. Now, because there's a human involved, it's easy enough to type something in wrong. Okay. This is where I'm saying it says it's not running. Okay, that's fine. But netsh, that's the big one. Okay, that's for the Windows world, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not on Mac this way. Okay, in the world of Linux, there's a couple options always. But what I want to do to start with there's an equivalent command in Linux, and that's called nmcli, as in Network Manager Command Line Interface. And we'll play around with that a little bit today too. So the two commands that you need to walk away from today, and I'll put it in the chat, is Windows. You have got to know netsh as administrator for the most part. And on Linux, it's nmcli. There's other tools in this space, but the Network Manager CLI is a good way to manage desktop environments. Like if you have a suite of 30 or 40 Linux boxes, the nmcli is an easy way to automate things. When you start moving up higher into, hey, my Linux box is actually running nothing but pure networking, there's different sets of tools that you would use when you're doing, when you're optimizing Linux to be your router and your switch and your bridge and all that good stuff, and your firewall, okay? But the concepts apply. You type in a command, you get a menu structure. You navigate the menu structure, you commit, you save, bounce the box, comes back to life, okay? And this is also true on, I mentioned Cisco, Ubiquiti, so on. Ubiquiti, I've got a little Ubiquiti router. It's called I can't remember what it is, Bickety. I think it's just a router fast version 4 or something. But when you poke into the command line, you can pop out of that menu structure and you have a Linux distribution. You have a command line only version of Linux that you can play with and tinker with inside your Ubiquiti router, okay? And that's kind of the way a lot of the OSs work. Cisco doesn't let you do that. Cisco has its own iOS, what they call Internet Operating System, and you can only address it through their menu structure. And they've got a lot more fault tolerance put in, so it's a little harder for you to type in the wrong thing, but it also makes it, you have to learn more to be able to be effective with it, okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do is start with Kali Live here and give you an example. This is just a virtual machine that I'm setting up, nothing fancy here. I do want to bring up that I've got 2 network adapters, and I will have my shared folders set up so I can actually copy stuff to the host OS. So let's bring this one up. And while that's booting, let's see if I can crash and burn my machine here. It's running live. And then you to escape, to get your mouse back, you use Alt Control left side. And over here on the virtual box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new virtual machine using an installed version of Linux, okay? So it's basically Linux, and it's Kali runs on Debian 64. So I'm going to type this in as Kali ins as an install, okay? And click next. And I want to give it 4 gig of RAM because I've only got a 32 gig box here. So 4096, yeah, close enough. And then yes, let's create a virtual hard drive. And the way it works on both VMware and Oracle is it does not, it says, notice it's allocated for 8 gig. It does not allocate all 8 gig all at once. It only allocates what it needs when it needs it, which is why your virtual machine will sometimes pause. However, if you use one of these other formats, VMDK or VHD, it will allocate all 8 gigabyte, 8, whatever, 1 terabyte to your virtual machine and gobble up a lot of disk. VirtualBox with their VDI will only use what you need when you need it. And here's what it says, dynamically allocated. If I say fixed size, you're right. It's going to use 8 gigabytes of data off my hard drive, okay? And then it tells you where you want it, how big it should be. 8 gigs should be big enough for what I want to do today. And there it is. That's all I've got. Now, let's take a quick look through some of these options here of what they look like. I've given it a name, advanced. Do I want to share clipboards? Do I want to do drag and drop? You have to have, if you do this on Windows, all this stuff gets installed magically. If you do this on Linux and you're running VirtualBox, there's an extra little package you have to install to make this work, okay? To get these options, okay? And then you give it a description, whatever you want to call it. Do you want to encrypt the disk? Can or can't, based on what you want to do. System, how do you want to boot this thing? Well, I don't want the floppy, that's for sure. I do want to boot off optical to start with, okay? That's good. And then these sort of things, you just take the defaults until you learn more about VirtualBox, because VirtualBox is kind of a hack of KVM. So if you kind of learn KVM and QEMU, it's a natural fit to how Oracle's VirtualBox works. And I've been thinking about this. I'm trying to figure out why Oracle hasn't charged for this yet. Well, the reason they haven't charged for VirtualBox yet, it's an easy way to wean people off Microsoft SQL Server and get them onto Oracle databases. So that's probably why they haven't charged you yet. And you can allocate your CPUs. You can allow it to do nested virtual machines, nest. You can do that. A lot of fun. Doesn't teach you much, but you can do nested virtual machines. Display, how you do your display. You can enable your speed and so on. Remote display. Now, what this is this allows you. Now, let me ask this question. I'm going to bring my Windows terminal server back, or command line. Type in exit. How many have used it? Has anybody used it? Yay, nay, brand new. This is new. A few of you type in yes, good. If you don't know, that's okay. That's why you're in this class. This is all part of networking. Okay. What is this remote desktop connection? It's how you can remote control a box in your enterprise. So you don't have to walk to the machine to manipulate it. There are also Linux tools that allow you to do this. There are a gazillion tools in this space. This is not a new technology. It's been around a really long time. And it's just about as old as X Windows. But the way it works varies across systems, okay? So what you do here is remote. Now, you can go search for this somewhere on your computer. I can never remember where they hide it in the menu structure. So I open the command line and type in Microsoft Terminal Services Client and just do it that way. If you have a Windows Server license, I think it comes with 5 or 6 valid remote desktop connection licenses. So you can have 5 people log in, or 6, to Microsoft Server with separate usernames. The way it works on Windows 10, and I can't speak for Windows 11 yet because I haven't played with it yet, and Windows 8 and Windows 7, is that when you connect your remote desktop, whoever is currently logged in to that desktop loses their desktop. You yank control from the user. So you have to be careful when you use this because you can really freak somebody out. Okay. In the world of Linux, it's all bets are off. Everything's different in the world of Linux and Mac and so on and so forth. If you're an Ubuntu user or a Mac user, they mimic remote desktop communication to where you only have the one client connected at one time, okay? You don't have to be limited that way. You can actually set up a server that supports all kinds of things. And I'll put this in the chat. This is way out of the scope. Apache, pardon my spelling, guacamole. The Apache Guacamole project is a server you put on your enterprise, and it supports all kinds of ways to connect to graphical interfaces on your desktops. You can connect through Guacamole to a Windows box, through Guacamole to a Mac, through Guacamole to a virtual machine using Spice. You can use it, Guacamole, to connect to a Linux box using VNC or X Windows or. Okay. It's quite the complex project. Okay. But that's outside the scope of what we're talking about today. The remote desktop connection is also available to you in Google. Did I show you this? Anybody? I can't remember if I showed it to you in this class. Maybe I showed it in my Linux class. Okay. Let's do, I'll search on remote desktop Chrome. All right, folks. If you have Chrome, you can log into your computer from home, from anywhere. Here's the key. You must have a Gmail account. You must log into your computer and leave Chrome running. There is a desktop app that says you can say access my computer, and I have one machine set up. The other machine I have set up is broken. It's actually this machine I'm on, so I really don't want to connect to my local machine or I get this funny loop. Okay, but it's that easy to connect to a remote machine. Okay, very simple. Now there's two ways to access this machine. You can set it up for remote access to where you can always log in and always get to your box with nobody else's permission. However, let's say you're working with, I don't know, your cousin in Minot, North Dakota, and he's kind of paranoid about things, and he doesn't want you to look at his box all the time. So you can use this remote support. And then what this does is it generates a code that you say, okay, cuz what is the code that was generated? And I can connect to your machine, because every time you run this, it's only a 5-minute code. And that gives them the ability, that would give me the ability to connect to their box, do my thing, log out, and would never be able to log back into that box again. Okay. How many knew about Google Remote Desktop? Just, you can throw your hands up, put stuff out there, put it in that. So again, we have one no, two no. Okay, a few of you heard of it. Okay. Now, I do know that, now, I think there's one person in the district office is taking this class, but I don't know if they're online right now. I don't see their name. Of course, my screen is all cluttered. But on campus, they know this is happening and they can watch it with the Fortinet server or the Fortinet deep packet inspection. And so the top level networking people can turn this off in a heartbeat. Okay. So this sort of thing is you're not getting away with anything. It's just that how many people are using it, and is anybody who's using it causing problems? If they are, trust me, it's going to get snagged and stopped. Okay. And obviously, set up another computer via SSH is only going to be possible if you're on a box that's running an SSH server. Okay. So that means Windows, no, unless you install an SSH server. And I do want to show you one other little client piece. I notice I have remote desktop up here. It's a little hard to see, I'm sorry. And then right here is something. This to me is really, really cool. I want you to watch what I'm doing here. What am I doing? Okay. Why do I get people? That's some spam. Well, time to tighten up my mail server. I am on I'm using what? I'm using Chrome. This does not work on Chromium. This does not work on Firefox. I haven't tested it with Internet, whatever their latest is, Edge. It's using a specialized compile stack that is proprietary to our good friends at Google. Now, what you have here is full-on Linux. So I can do IPA, look at my command, and do host name minus uppercase I, see what IP addresses are allocated. And then if I want to, I can run it through this. Field one delimiter. So I can actually parse out my IP4 address, see where I've got it. Can run nmap against my local host to see what ports I have open. I'm in the browser, folks. Okay. I'm not using any terminal client. I'm not going through the Jupyter notebook. All I did was load this thing here, this secure shell manage extension. Okay. It has been in beta for as long as I have used it. And sometimes when you use this, it doesn't work. But this is the fun part. You can remote control, or actually SSH into your Linux, Unix box, Mac box of choice, as long as there's an SSH daemon running, the service. But you can also, when you connect, I'm going to go ahead and connect to, let me connect to a box that's in a state of disrepair. This one I'm still working on. But when I connect, here it is, nothing fancy. I type in exit, but watch what happens. I can say, let's do reconnect, and it loads it, ask for the password. So let's close that. Go here, and if I say connection dialog, I can pick that machine and click right here. SFTP. Allow. I log in. And depending on, let's see here. Yeah, there's been some subtle changes here. Is it I can now upload and download files through the Chrome browser to my target Linux box using SFTP. And that's slick. Pretty cool. One last thing about the crazy browsers. Now this works on all browsers. Now this one I'm really curious to see if you know about this. File, :123. File, :123. I know it works on Firefox. Let me try something here. Oh, you know what? Maybe this doesn't work on Windows. Does somebody know about this? I do this on Linux all the time. On Linux, any browser, I'm putting it in chat. you can use file : 1, 2, 3. And what it does is it opens a file manager on the local machine. Or maybe it's files. Let me try that. You know, this is interesting. You get used to something, you know, and you use it on one platform, and you go to another platform and go, what doesn't work? Oh no. Okay. Anyway, 2 more things to play with, and I'll have to look at that. It's like using Chrome as a file browser, using Chrome as a file. Let's say file manager. So it is that. So I am right. Okay. But you actually have to go someplace. So let's try this. Okay. Never mind. Let's do file : 1, 2, 3 C. You need to C colon. Notice I typed my slash in wrong. So sorry about that. It should be this way. This is a mistake I continue to make. And I've been doing this for so long, is that I get my slashes mixed up between the OSs. Okay. But now I'm in Chrome, and guess what, folks? I can poke around on my box. I can't do anything. I can't change anything, but I can look at stuff. And this is a perfect example of, there's your space, application space data. Okay. So it does work, but on Windows, you need to type in file : 1, 2, 3 C : / okay, or whatever drive you have permission to. Okay. Now, how many knew about that? I'm curious. Anybody? Okay. No idea, no idea, no idea. Okay. You know, this is the kind of stuff, I'll be quite honest. So much of this stuff that I've learned over the years, this kind of thing, I did not know until I actually stumbled on it completely by accident when I was looking for something else. I did get lucky on a few times where I would learn little tricks like this from people who were smarter than me. But most of the time, there was nobody around me. I had to learn most of my tech from books. So it took me a lot longer to learn things because you didn't have anybody to bounce things off of. But you learn deeper and better, I think. But you don't always have time to learn something at a super deep level because there's a pressure of production. Okay. So play with that stuff and see what you can come up with. And this shell thing I showed you, I can't remember. I make sure, you see, I have a Gmail account and it's the same one I've been using for years, but I do not use it for anything. I don't use it for email. I don't use it. I don't use too much of Google Docs because we have the full Microsoft suite here. We have the OneDrive, we have all that other stuff. I personally, of file share stuff, I like Dropbox the best because it plays so nicely with Linux. The other, you can get Google Drive to work on Linux. It's a hack. It doesn't always work with the command line, which is where I'm at all the time. And with Dropbox, boom, it's always there. It just works. But this shell, and this mosh, I'll let you explore what mosh is. It's definitely not for beginners. Mosh is not for most network people. Mosh is for system administrators that take care of thousands of machines. Okay, it's a very I won't say it's complex. It's a unique tool that works inside the enterprise. You don't necessarily want mosh on your public facing internet because you have to open ports in your firewall, and that always leads to problems. Okay, and when you say manage extension, somewhere down here, there is a link. There we go. I guess you just search for it, secure shell, and just search for it, and you can add it to your Chrome as long as you're logged in. You don't have to log in. Okay, you can add it to Chrome without your login. But when you have your Gmail login, it synchronizes all this stuff across the different browsers you use. It's kind of like what roaming profiles were supposed to be in Microsoft Windows 100 years ago. Now, what is this NAS stuff? I'm not going to go into that. Okay, I'll let you go explore that. Okay. All right. So some useful and useless techniques that will come in handy. So you want to write down netsh, nmcli, file : ///c : whatever, or just / on Unix. The Chrome add-in called Secure Shell that allows you to remotely access computers. Very, very handy. Remote desktop for Microsoft Terminal Services Client for the Windows world. That's MS, Microsoft Terminal Services Client on Windows. And then on Linux, it's called VNC or Vino or Tiger VNC or blah, 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 blah. And then Linux. And there's a specialized one for VMs, and it's called Spice, that allows you to remote control a machine. And all that discussion about remote access started over here in Enable the Display for remote access. So I can use RDP, Microsoft's Remote Desktop Protocol, to connect to my Kali Linux machine. Okay, so I'm going to turn that on. And recording allows you to record stuff. You can actually record keystroke. So you say like you want to teach somebody how to do something, and there's just too many mouse clicks. So open up your virtual machine, click on, or this is in VirtualBox. Open up your VirtualBox, open up your virtual machine, you click enable recording, you go through your thing, turn it off, you now have a video that is that .wem format. This is the web embedded binary display stuff that allows you to encapsulate your video and just make it a link on some web page. Okay, it does gobble up disk. Okay, storage, what are you using it for? Notice in our VMware, it defaults to SCSI. And I want to use this one. Defaults to SCSI here. I'll go look at setting. So we have SCSI is the default here. And then they also have a controller for SATA, which is SATA is basically embedded SCSI, if you really want to get picky about it. Audio, I don't want audio on a virtual machine. Network, yeah, I want a network. I'm just going to use one for right now. I'm just going to use my NAT, leave it as is. Serial ports. Do I want to enable serial ports? No, not right now. USB, why not? Shared folders? Yes. Let's create a shared folder. And oops. Setting shared folder. I have to click here. Your folder path C:, and I want to give it a C drive. That's good enough. Read only, auto mount it, mount point. I want to put it into /mnt C drive. Okay. The VR. I'll give it the same thing with the underscore. All right. We'll see what happens. We'll hit. Now on this machine with Windows box, I got C, D, E, and F. Okay, or C, D, and E. I think I'll just use D because that's where all the. No, I'll use C drive. That's fine. I can add another one. Put that another one. Add D:. Now, do you see this as a possible security problem? You betcha. This could be a really huge security issue. And when you enable the shared folders, VMware and VirtualBox and KVM, they all give you warnings. Are you sure you really want to do this? And they tell you, hey, wait a minute, you may be giving yourself a headache. Okay. And let's go back to settings. User interface. All right. This basically tells you what you want as far as displaying things as you are tinkering along. Okay. So you can take all the details there. And these are all the little icons they're saying the things that are configured. Okay. So I'm going to hit OK now. Now I'm ready to start this machine. Okay. So let's hit start. Now I encourage you all to play with VMware and VirtualBox because virtualization is reality where the future is going. All right, what's going on here? This is on the other screen. Select startup disk. I want the ISO. It's giving me an error because it didn't point to the ISO. Okay, here it goes. Now it's, there we go. All right, now it's telling you, okay, how do you want to have your mouse go in and out of the virtual machine? The host key is currently defined as Control-Alt. So we'll just take the defaults here. Notice, here I am, okay? Here's Linux. Oh, that's Alpine Linux. That's the wrong one. So let me hit Control-Alt, and here all I do is type in root and type in alt. Okay, this makes sense. I need to show you this anyway. Once it comes to a stop, and let's power off the machine, and then go to settings, system, storage. I want you to notice the controller here. That little icon right there is the one you need. Okay. You need to find right there. There it is. You click on the CD and you can click on the live CD. Then you click on this little icon. This is hard to find because you have to click on this and choose a file. And I'm going to go to my D drive, which is where my ISO stuff is. And I want the Kali installer because I'm actually installing it in this virtual machine. So there it is. Now I can hit OK. And now I can hit start. And now I can do this. If you haven't built virtual machines, I highly recommend you do it because it gives you a good way to build operating systems without having to trash hardware. Okay. And okay, I'm just going to take the graphical install and walk through this fairly quickly. Okay. It says I can't find things. Error, error, error. All right. Yes, I want English, United States, American English. You can take pretty much most of the defaults. And you can see it runs fairly quickly because my ISO is on disk and I'm creating a virtual disk on disk. So if you had this all on a SSD drive or all on a M2 drive, it would be even faster. Okay. And giving it a name of Kali, let's give it Kali INS for install. Now I won't give it a domain name because it's not going to be living that long. Create a user called Tux. That's usually my first user on VM. And then I give it a password of VMware 12. So it's a virtual machine, VMware 12. So I can remember what my passwords were for all the virtual machines I've created over the years. Because if you forget, you gotta go into recovery mode and reset it. Now, I can set up encrypted, use a logical volume manager, or just use the entire disk. I'll just use the entire disk. Make it simple. All files in one partition. Make it simple. And then here you say yes, and it trashes everything on the virtual disk, and it creates something. Now, while this is grinding away, I want to mention that you can use VMware and VirtualBox to boot an actual Windows machine or a actual, let's say you pull a hard drive out of a working Linux box, okay? Like in this classic, I yank out a drive, but I don't have another machine to put it into. So I get an external hard drive box and I put it on my computer of choice. I can now create a virtual machine that runs that disk. The buzzword is raw. You can boot a raw partition inside your virtual machine, which means you can take that disk after you boot it and play with it, put it back into the computer, and it will boot, providing you don't trash it somehow, okay? So it does work, but you, again, it's a sharp-edged tool, and it doesn't always work as advertised. That's how I created a dual boot system at one time. It was way more work than it was worth. Because when you boot a virtual machine, it has to change the hardware files in Windows. So what I did is I took a Windows box, took the drive out, and booted it on my laptop. And then I would boot the raw drive inside of the virtual machine. I used VMware at the time. And what ended up happening is it would take forever to boot because it had to redo the hardware profiles from scratch. And then I'd take the drive out, and I'd put it back into the Windows box, and it would take forever to boot because it had to redo all the profiles. But it did work. So you can create an honest to God dual boot system using the virtual machine to boot between the two partitions. Why did I do that? Well, that was before the days of shared folders. So I would boot my Linux, run Windows in a virtual machine, and connect to it through the network. Okay. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the defaults. These are display managers. This is not a X Windows or Linux class, so we'll just skip that. But it is very possible to do that. You created a dual boot machine. You booted your Linux box, but there's a file you need on your Windows box. Oh, darn. Well, shared folders solve the problem quite nicely. If you don't have shared folders, you can actually boot the Windows inside of Linux via the virtual machine. It's quite the headache, but you do learn a lot. Okay. We'll let this run. Now, while that's grinding away, talked about raw partitions. I will log in here as Cali, that's a default. And I will show you the equivalent, and I'll use root here. Now, is that big enough to see, or is it a little on the small side? Your silence is consent, so I will assume you can see it. Okay, all right. You type in nmcli. This works almost identically. Well, it drops you out after each command, but you can do this. You can type it from the command line, and it shows you all the devices and how they're configured on your machine. So like Windows with the netsh, Linux has this, okay, and nmcli. This is where you can actually do things like, let's do help here, nmcli help. And it tells you all the things you can do, okay? And there is actually a man page called man nmcli examples. If it's installed, and it gives you all these commands that you can run from the command line. So you can connect your wireless by way of this. You can configure your wireless. You can do everything you do through the GUI through this. Now, I can speak from the point of Linux here, is that most of your GUIs still interface at a character-based level here, this stuff, command line, okay? And Windows is getting there. They're slowly moving more and more subsystems into this idea that you have a command line to script it. And so they've done some really good improvements in the server arena on server 2019. They've made some nice improvements, okay? So you can actually add a bridge to slave profile. You do it all from the command line. And this, just reading this page, you're going, well, I don't have Linux. I don't have the man pages. All you have to do is bring up a web browser, type in Linux man page, nmcli examples, and you will find a man page on that, okay? I'll even show it to you there. Okay, fine. Linux man page nmcli example. Bring it over into the viewer. So that's what I searched on. And it gives you the synopsis, and it gives you the full web page. Well, the full man page as a web page. So you can see this is a little bit longer reading than just, you know, if you want to play with each one of these, it takes a little bit longer than a lunchtime to learn some of this stuff, okay? But this is some pretty advanced networking troubleshooting where you can create a route via a bridge and move stuff into the other, you know, move stuff around the network temporarily. Let's say you have a router that collapses. Well, if you've got a Linux box with 2 network cards, you can reroute that traffic using my epic fail of route add to that router, and then that Linux box can route the traffic out. So you have basically minimal downtime. Okay? And so covered a lot of different material here today, but it was a lot of new stuff for you. That's good. I never know how much somebody knows or doesn't know in these classes. So in quick review, what did we do? Skimming through the chat here, we did Windows Net SH, Linux Net, nmcli stands for Network Manager. command line interface, Apache guacamole, which was only, that's a monster server box outside scope. And then on the browser, I showed you the file : / various ways to do remote control. On Windows, it's called RDP, DNC, VMs use Spice, and then Google Remote Desktop. Now that one's easy to set up. You just install a client on your machine or the machine in your living room or a virtual machine, and you can control your virtual machine from anywhere on the planet. Okay, so it's kind of it's a fun exercise. Okay, all right, and this Kali Linux is taking a little longer to install than I thought, but I had two purposes to do this. One, I wanted to show you that on VMware, I have the live ISO. In other words, it does not maintain state. I can create a file, call it junk.txt, and say, hi. Let's do, okay, there's my junk file. And if I hit reboot, that file will not be there. That's what live means. Live means nothing is saved. Okay. So how would I save things? Remember that concept we talked about in the beginning? Commit. Same idea here. Okay. Installation failed. Okay, let's see what happened. Epic fail. Select and start software. Okay. All right, continue. So let's skip the select install. Let's go see if it continues on. Nope. I think what happened is I ran out of disk space, because when you do the full install of Kali Linux, it's a whole lot bigger than 8 GB. Okay. And I forgot that this was the heavy duty version of it. So what I'm going to do is hit power off, and I can go to settings here. Go to storage, and let's see here. I can create a new one, delete it, start all over. See, actual size is 7 GB. So what ended up happening is I basically ran out of space. So I can remove it and add it, make it bigger and reinstall. I'll save that for another day. But that's, so yes, you can run VMware and VirtualBox on Windows at the same time, as long as the Hyper-V subsystem is not installed. Okay, so I rebooted, and I was on root, mind you. And if I do an ls, you notice there's nothing, there's no junk file. Gone. Poof. So when you boot live, nothing is saved on disk. Okay. But remember, you're still going out the same IP port. So if you're trying to be sneaky on the web, it's not helping much. You have to be sneaky all the way up the food chain. You have to occlude your traffic using Tor and some of the other, using VPN on VPN on VPN, using Tor on Tor on Tor. Then things are getting encrypted enough that you're going to be occluded on the web. But the way the government and the Patriot Act work is, you and I send an encrypted email message. Just because it's encrypted, there's nothing in it. It says, hi, how you doing? What's up? Because it's encrypted, it gives the government the right to capture it and keep it forever in case they need to build a case on you. Yeah, doesn't that sound lovely? Well, it's not just here. It's United States, it's Russia, it's China, it's North Korea. It's all the cyber actors in this space. They're collecting information about people. And I was telling my wife that there was an interesting exploit with DNA history, ancestry.com, and 23andMe, is that they're finding people that are related to you in some sort of an honest to God, true DNA match, but that person is not real. That person is a state actor somewhere harvesting information about you and your family that they may need someday. Isn't that lovely? So needless to say, they're tightening up all those things. So it's a crazy world out there in the world of security. There's a lot of the ancient traditions talk about all things are not as they seem, or some things are not as they seem. I like the variation that says all things are not as they seem. Nothing is what you think it is, because our perception is limited. Okay. All right. I think I broke your brain enough today, even though I've got a few more minutes. So here's what I want you to practice with is the net shell on Windows. That's something you definitely are going to need. CLS. You definitely are going to need this net shell. Okay. Play with some examples. There's some examples in your test out, I'm sure. Play with them. Play with Microsoft Terminal Services Client. Okay. Because this way, Microsoft Terminal Services. So you can do remote control of machines in your house, assuming a lot of you are on Windows. If you're on Mac, it also supports an RDB client, but I don't know if it's an official Apple client or if it's part of the open source software called Homebrew. If you want open source stuff on a Mac, you use a plugin or a suite called Homebrew, and it's a bunch of the open source stuff compiled to run on Mac OS. Okay, called Homebrew. And then as far as remote control, play with remote desktop in Google. And if you are so inclined on your Google, you can play on your Chrome desktop. You can play with the secure shell login. You can play with remote desktop. Okay. And tinker with it. These are all, the remote desktop client actually has to be installed on the target machine you want to control. If you want to remote control that machine at any time from anywhere. If you want to do tech support, that is not true. If you want to do tech support, you just do remote access while the person's logged in and it connects via Chrome. Okay. Now, all this stuff with remote desktop and Chrome, it goes through the mothership. So everything you do is getting logged by way of your Gmail account, by way of the VPN that they've created. It's all being logged and tracked on the Google servers. Okay. Anonymized to some level, but you never know. Okay. Because it has to go through the mothership to create the VPN, because you're basically installing a server and client automatically behind the scenes. Okay. So it's an extremely stripped back VPN, but there's also very little overhead. It runs fairly quickly. I was rather impressed, to be honest with you. I go, wow, this works pretty well. Okay. All right. Now that I've filled your brain with a bunch of useless trivia, questions, because we have a few more minutes. I hear crickets. You know, as an instructor, you think I'd learn this lesson at the end of class when things are obviously winding down. that is not the time to say, does anybody have any questions? Because if anybody's smart enough, they're going to say, if they keep their mouth shut, we'll get out of class 2 minutes early. One of these days I'll learn. Okay, folks. On that note, I will stop the recording and we will continue on our quest of learning things. There. Oh yeah, I gotta stop the screen share to get that back. Screen share shop. And now I can stop the recording.